You know that feeling, right? You hear a song you haven't heard in years, or you catch a certain smell, and boom, you're instantly transported. You're not here anymore. You're somewhere back in your past, reliving a moment so clearly it feels real. That powerful, kind of strange mix of happy and sad, well, that's nostalgia. It's such a potent force, and it always seems to paint the past with this warm, golden glow. It makes us wonder, why does everything back then seem so much simpler, maybe even better? We're going to dig into that because the answer tells us a whole lot about how our own brains are wired. And the word itself is actually a huge clue. It comes from two Greek words, nostos for homecoming and algos for pain. So it literally means the pain of wanting to go home. When it was first coined back in the 17th century, it wasn't about fondly remembering your favorite cartoon. No, it was a serious medical diagnosis for soldiers who were dangerously homesick. So how on earth did it go from a deadly disease to that warm, fuzzy feeling we get from looking at old photos? Well, that's exactly what we're going to explore. We'll start with that bittersweet feeling itself. Then we'll look at what's actually happening in your brain. We'll talk about the good side of looking back and the dangers. And finally, we'll figure out how we can use nostalgia as a tool, not a trap. So let's start with the science. The journey our understanding of nostalgia has taken is pretty wild. It's gone from something doctors would try to cure you of to what psychologists now see as a kind of mental superpower. I mean, really, get this. Back in 1668, it was considered a legitimate, sometimes fatal disease. Commanders would even ban certain folk songs because they were afraid it would trigger this deadly homesickness in their troops. The supposed cures were intense. We're talking leeches or even being buried alive for a bit. Yikes. By the 1900s, it had softened into a kind of deep melancholy. But today, now we see it as a genuinely helpful psychological tool. What a change, right? So, what is actually firing up in your brain when that wave of nostalgia hits? Well, it all starts in the hippocampus. Think of this part of your brain as a master librarian. A certain sound or a smell is like a library request, and the hippocampus goes sifting through the shelves to pull out that one specific memory from years ago. But a memory on its own is just data. It's just a file. That's where the amygdala comes in. The amygdala is the emotion connector. It's the part that grabs that memory file and slaps a big emotional sticky note on it. Joy, comfort, maybe a little bit of longing. That partnership is why these memories feel so incredibly real and powerful. And here's the kicker. The reason it feels so good. As this is all happening, your brain's reward system kicks into gear, releasing feel-good chemicals like dopamine. It's a literal pleasure response. And that's the secret to that whole bittersweet thing. It's why a memory that might even be a little sad, maybe about someone you miss, can still leave you feeling comforted and warm. Okay, so all that brain chemistry adds up to some pretty serious psychological benefits. A great way to think about nostalgia is as emotional comfort food. Yeah, it's like a warm bowl of mac and cheese for your soul. It gives you this sense of safety and warmth, especially when you're feeling stressed or things feel a little uncertain. And the benefits are real. When you look back at good times with friends and family, it pushes back against feelings of loneliness. When you remember a time you succeeded at something, it gives your self-esteem a little boost. You remember tough times you got through, and suddenly you feel more resilient and optimistic. It basically grounds you in who you are and reminds you that you've got this. But, and this is a really big but, like any powerful thing, you've got to handle it with care. This quote really hits the nail on the head. The past is a fantastic teacher, but it is not a place to live. It's great to visit, but you can't set up camp there. And that brings us to the flip side, because when we get too attached to those daydreams, when we stay in the past for too long, it stops being a comfort and it starts being, well, an escape. And that escape can turn into a kind of prison that stops us from actually living in the now. So the trick is knowing the difference. Healthy nostalgia leaves you feeling grateful and inspired. It connects you to what you value. Unhealthy nostalgia, on the other hand, just leaves you with regret and a sense of loss. It's the difference between saying, wow, I'm so glad that happened, versus saying, man, nothing will ever be that good again. One helps you grow, the other just keeps you stuck. When it turns unhealthy, we get trapped comparing our messy, complicated present to a glossy, simplified version of the past. And research shows that for people who are already prone to anxiety, nostalgia can actually backfire, making feelings of loss even deeper instead of bringing any comfort. And you can bet that advertisers and politicians have noticed just how powerful this feeling is. There is a massive nostalgia economy built to capitalize on it.
You see it in entertainment, with every movie reboot or sequel banking on our childhood memories. You see it with brands using retro packaging to sell us a feeling of comfort. And you definitely see it in politics, with slogans that promise to bring back a great past that's often been heavily romanticized. This leads to a really, really important question we have to ask ourselves, especially when we see this happening on a bigger scale. When someone sells you on returning to the good old days, the question has to be good for whom? These romanticized versions of the past often leave out a whole lot of people. The good old days were often defined by exclusion and injustice for way too many. So, where does that leave us? How do we navigate all this? Well, it all comes down to how we use it. Nostalgia isn't good or bad. It's just a tool. And whether it helps us or hurts us depends entirely on if we're using it for inspiration or as an escape hatch from reality. Here's a simple 3-step way to think about it. First, cherish your personal story. Let those memories be a source of strength and comfort. Step 2, question the public narrative. When an ad or a political speech tries to sell you nostalgia, ask yourself, what are they really selling and whose story are they leaving out? And third, build a better future. Use the real lessons from your past, your resilience, your values, as fuel for today. And here's the last crucial thing to remember. Your memory is not a perfect video recording. It's more like a movie trailer. Your brain is an amazing editor that's really good at keeping the emotional highlights and cutting out the boring, mundane, or painful parts. That's a huge reason why the past can feel so much better in hindsight. So, in the end, nostalgia is like a map of where you've been. It's filled with all these rich moments that give your life meaning and shape who you are. The past teaches you about your strengths, what you believe in, and who you're connected to. The only question left is, how are you going to use those lessons to chart the course for where you're going next?